Initiating contact with your higher self. Chapter 4. What you will learn in this chapter. What the higher self is and is not. The first steps to accessing your higher self. How to recognize and use your lower self. Why you must ask when you wish to receive. How to establish signals and develop confidence in your higher self connection. What is the higher self? The higher self is the version of you that is fully connected to God. It is that part of you that is fully aware of yourself as you and as God. Some call the higher self the mediator, but even that implies separateness, which is not real. Your first goal is to communicate with your higher self. The next goal is to move your higher self presence into your physical body. Then you will be a walking, ascended being. Imagine for a moment that your higher self is like a circuit board that has unlimited potential. In third-dimensional expression, you have a very limited circuit board. If you put too much voltage to the circuit, you can burn it out. You can try to go directly to God, but because of your circuit board's limitation, your connection to God is restricted by who you are in the physical body. Your goal is to use your heart to expand your capacity. As you expand your heart through the many practices offered in this book, you will discover that your capacity to know and express your love of God increases dramatically. Eventually, with an expanded heart, you can be a direct channel from Source. Imagine your cell phone connection in a remote area. Every time you are on your phone, your connection is unstable, yet when you have Wi-Fi access, that direct access is easy and fast. You can make an important call from the remote area, but when you know where to get Wi-Fi direct access, i.e. your higher self, you would choose that. The purpose of this section is to help you identify your higher self, work with developing your communication, and learn to get direct access to God through your higher self. What is the higher self connection? The higher self connection is something you build with a specific practice that, if done with diligence, will not fail you in your time of need. Ultimately, this is the first step you are seeking. As far as I'm concerned, after the opening of the heart in Chapter 2, this is the most important part of the book. This is more important than programming your MerKaBa. Remember, whether you choose to learn the MerKaBa or not, your higher self connection is the most important inner GPS you could ever achieve. It completely eliminates the need or usage of any other form of divination. The higher self connection is something you build with specific practice that will not fail you in your time of need. This is more important than programming your MerKaBa. There's a footnote that looks cool. It says some individuals are capable of higher connections due to huge traumas they experienced in childhood that cause them to create workaround connections. In my book, Reweaving the Fabric of Your Reality, I explain them as survival psychics. These connections are patchwork, evading the heart, not authentic heart connections, and eventually must go through the heart in order to build their God connection authentically. If they do not, they will not be able to achieve full integration of the four lower bodies. If you attempt to program your MerKaBa without the higher self connection, you will fail miserably and can cause considerable damage to yourself and others. Programming the MerKaBa without higher self endorsement for each and every program is a form of black magic. After you have established direct communication with your higher self, you will be able to integrate more of your higher self into your physical form. This is the goal of ascension. When you do this, you are claiming your roots, you are claiming your heritage as a divine being. What is stopping me? When you were born, you deliberately placed a barrier between you in your physical body and who you really are, your God self, in order to move your consciousness into physical matter. Once there, it is very likely that you forgot who you really are. The goal then is to reconnect you to yourself and become an enlightened being. You are not likely to do this instantly. You are moving through it slowly. You will maintain your awareness in the physical form while bringing in more of your divine self. If you brought in all of your divinity at once, you would not be able to maintain your presence in your body. You would pop out of the physical dimension. As you become more adapted and aware, allowing for integration of more and more of your higher self, then becoming the higher self is easily accomplished while maintaining your presence in the physical. Once you've developed your higher self connection to this new level, your higher self will communicate to you with unsolicited information. This is just like developing a friendship with the shopkeepers at a local shop you frequent. They will anticipate your tastes and interests and offer you things you might like. In a similar fashion, your higher self will begin to offer you information that you did not even know you needed. This is just wonderful. You may remember switching from a regular television to HD TV. You are still receiving the same TV show you were before, only now it's in high definition. The input hasn't changed, but your reception has greatly improved. Your ability to perceive the information has changed. You are a special and powerful being. You know who you are, yet at the same time may be afraid to admit it. If you are reading this book, you know that. This doesn't mean you are better than anyone else. You are not better, you are equal. Your self-awareness may be larger in any given moment than another's, but this does not mean you are more evolved or better. What it does mean is that you are self-aware to a different degree. Your role is unique. The color blue vibrates faster than the color red. Does the faster vibration make blue better than red? Hardly. You could be part of the way showers who have arrived for the purpose of going ahead and helping others toward their ascension. If this is true, you will be drawn to serve as part of the enlightenment crew. If you are part of this advanced crew, you may already be an ascended being and are remembering. Keep up the good work and you will be helping many others beside yourself. Extras hold the polarity reality. Others who are unlike you may very well be placeholders for the polarity reality, third dimension, so that you can totally see what you are choosing to see. Without them, you would not be able to see what you see. It may also be that when you no longer need to push toward your evolution and become enlightened, you will no longer need others to hold that polarity for you. What if all those others you are observing are extras, as they say on a movie set, just holding space for you and there just for your benefit? Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were ordinary men, but they were explorers and wayshowers. You are one too. Please believe me when I tell you that those who are reading this page at this point are at the edge of the cosmos of creation. You're at the edge of the reality of creation, which means that you may feel as if you are out there all alone or with relatively few others. Remember though, Lewis and Clark had the full support of the United States government behind them. You have the full support of the Great White Brotherhood behind you. Some would say that an important person must lead or go first to deal with all the fears and surprises, which may be difficult. I like to say it is a privilege and an honor. Both are correct. Whatever the case, you are up to the challenge. They only send the strong to do this sort of job. If you are reading this, chances are you are one of the strong, volunteer wayshowers. You did not come in alone. You have plenty of unseen helpers. You have plenty of support from the Creator. All you need to do is ask for help you need. Do it daily. Since this is a free will zone, you get a clean slate every day. Ask for what you need. A military officer sent to the field does not think twice about requisitioning supplies he may need to get the job done. If you need help and don't ask for it, you are missing the element of humility that allows you to ask for and receive help. Please ask for the help you need. The price is right, and believe me when I tell you, the beings of light are here to support you and need you to ask in order for them to fulfill their mission. Remember, we are in a free will zone. What is required of you is the ability to be fully present in the reality. That is a form of training. Anyone who is forging new paths, the Wright brothers, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and so on, relies on his wits. He also receives plenty of support in terms of getting all the latest information and tools that enable him to perform groundbreaking feats. He gets all the glory and credit even though there is a huge body of personnel, research, and science behind him that makes his mission possible. he still must apply his personal ingenuity to complete the job. You must be willing to take the first step, to step up to the plate, as they say in baseball. You must be willing to risk failure to achieve your evolution. Use this metaphor to know that you can ask for and are entitled to all the support required. If you are not getting what you think you need, ask again with clear conviction that you submitted the purchase order and that the system, the universe, absolutely must fulfill this order. One thing is certain. Just because your friends and family might not provide a whole lot of positive reinforcement, that doesn't mean all of heaven doesn't care. All of heaven is asking you to break through the patterns of your past, your family, your generation, our society, our culture, and so on. Not having support from your physical family forces you to gain conviction about what you believe and what you want. This actually helps you define boundaries and claim your power. Support is likely to be there from the heavenly hosts because you are at the front of the masses. Ask, how will you know you are on target? Your higher self will know. You will use your higher self connection to validate that what you are being given is on target. You can ask your higher self to validate anything you want. The saints and masters have achieved a full connection, and so can you. The way to a complete awareness of God, enlightenment, is through your higher self, and there are many ways to get connected to your higher self. Doing the MerKaBa and using the tools found in this book is one of them. Connecting with the higher self is a key element to learning the MerKaBa. We all have a higher self we can access and use, although many of us are not aware of it. How do you connect with the higher self? How is that different from just tuning in or asking for guidance? Before we begin that, allow me to introduce the lower self. The lower self is like the child to your adult ego self and is made up of elements. The lower self. Yes, there is a lower self. When I first learned about a Hawaiian spiritual practice for connecting to the lower self from Drunvalo, I ignored it. After all, I already had a strong connection with my higher self. I really did not need to be concerned about a lower self I didn't believe existed. Drunvalo had learned about it from a student in his class who radiated so much light that Drunvalo asked the man what he did. He was a Hawaiian kahuna who taught about both lower and higher self. He said that ancient Hawaiians believed the lower self is like a child and that you must become like an innocent child to connect through the lower self with the higher self. I believe this same concept is why Drunvalo suggests you become like a child to connect with the higher self. I didn't know anything about the lower self at that time either. Through trial and error, I learned why it is so important to understand this concept. In my own experience, I became aware that my lower self was not only the little girl in me, but much, much more. The lower self is dedicated to keeping you safe, teaching you about the ways of the world, and helping you to understand life. In a way, it is the simplest part of you. It is a compilation of mostly your ego and your desire body, emotional body, mental body, and physical body. It includes all the elements of you that operate your four lower body systems, physical, emotional, mental, etheric, that are centered on a physical incarnation. Up until now, the lower self has done a good job. After all, it has gotten you this far. The lower self is your friend. The lower self will give you accurate information for the immediate circumstances, especially if it has to do with your physical safety or your emotional body. Lower self feedback can be influenced by individuals who are around you and the environment. However, so the information is accurate but only to a point. The lower self also keeps track of past hurts and wounds to help you avoid similar situations. The lower self can also jump in and answer your questions without you realizing it is the lower self. To help illustrate this, I will be sharing with you stories about how the lower self can interact with you and you mistakenly could think it was your higher self. But first, let us learn more about the lower self. The practice of kinesiology or muscle testing to read the body is lower self information. You can get lower self data from a pendulum as well. I don't recommend the use of a pendulum because you can become dependent on it and because it can be influenced by your environment or the material that it is made from. Ideally, you will develop a connection with your higher self that makes the use of a pendulum obsolete. I am not saying using a pendulum is wrong. Remember, your goal is self-mastery and becoming your most evolved expression of you. You must learn to access your most authentic source, and in all cases, this source is your higher self, which is your direct connection to God. Lower self information is accurate to a point, but its operating system is based on experiences gained from living in a physical body. The lower self is pulling its information from the limited database of your 4 lower bodies: physical, emotional, mental, and etheric. It may also be pulling information and collecting data from individuals around you and from the environment. Because the lower self keeps track of past hurts and wounds, it can influence you to stay away from situations. Your lower self might choose to avoid similar painful situations that may be important to you now. You could be influenced inappropriately by your lower self if it is reflecting the data from your physical location or from nearby persons. This is why it may be useful to use kinesiology or a pendulum to determine what vitamins you should take, what therapies you might need, or sensitivities to food. The practice of applied kinesiology or manual muscle testing to read the body is lower self information. You can get lower self data from a pendulum as well. Your higher self is your direct connection to God. Because the lower self keeps track of past hurts and wounds, it can influence you to stay away from situations. Your lower self might choose to avoid similar painful situations that may be important to you now. The children's story Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie gives us a very compelling look at the lower self. It shows Peter Pan giving an accurate display of the lower self making all the decisions and avoiding situations that may be useful to an adult. The lower self has your best interests at heart, but it acts like a child in comparison to your higher self. This means that it has a limited vision of what you wish for yourself in this reality. It also is not as readily able to cross-reference all of your needs into one composite understanding. How do you distinguish your higher self from lower self? Whenever you ask your higher self a question, always begin with, "Higher self." Do not assume that if you pose a question in your mind, the voice answering is your higher self. Unless you have specifically addressed your higher self by name, it can be anything. The lower self can jump in and answer your questions without you realizing it is the lower self. There was a woman who asked her higher self if she should go on a date with a man she found attractive. She received an affirmative answer. They went out, nothing bad happened, and nothing good happened. The woman, who also valued her time, came home frustrated and asked her higher self, "What was that all about?" Her higher self responded, "You never asked your higher self when you asked the question." She was astonished. Her higher self continued, "Your lower self jumped in and answered for your higher self." The woman was quite shocked. It had never occurred to her when she asked the question that her lower self could answer for her higher self. It was at that point she realized she had not specified who should answer the question and presumed it was her higher self. There is also the possibility you may have entities that will answer your question. They may give you accurate but biased information. Be careful. Remember, your higher self will answer when called. The woman who went on the fruitless date with a man who turned out to be of no interest to her was getting accurate information from her lower self. Why? Because her lower self was expressing for the little girl who wanted to be special, the woman in her who wanted to be desirable, and the part of her that wanted companionship. Had she also known there would be no friendship and it would not go anywhere, she would have declined the invitation. Her higher self would have known other factors that were more important to her and given her a different answer. When this decision was put into the context of her busy lifestyle, it was very clear to her that it was a waste of her time. Only her higher self would be able to arrive at that conclusion by weighing all of her needs and providing her with a response that would be the perfect solution for her. The lower self has your personal information close at hand. The higher self has access to all the information from the 4 lower bodies, your divine self, and other persons involved, and is able to integrate them all to bring balanced responses. You may not know why your higher self gives you a certain answer, and it may seem counterintuitive. Your higher self has access to everything beyond your physical senses as well, along with everything beyond your mental awareness in the recesses of your mind. When you go on a driving road trip and use your GPS or Maps app, it tells you all the roadblocks and delays. Using the higher self is like using your GPS. This can be compared to the lower self that may be reading a map or looking at a compass, but might not have the latest updates. The higher self, along with your activated MerKaBa, responds to your current request, taking in all factors, known or unknown to you. Using your higher self along with your activated MerKaBa ensures you are fully connected to the reality throughout all time, all dimensions, and all space. Your higher self connection is valid whether you are practicing the MerKaBa meditation or not. Your MerKaBa helps you maintain your fifth dimensional energy flawlessly. In spite of this, you could only do one thing. The higher self connection will steer you toward love and the highest and best choice for you in the moment. The higher self is the central guide. The activated MerKaBa makes living as a 5D'er easier in a 3D world. What is the difference between your higher self and lower self? These are bullet points listed. The first one is your higher self is proactive, your lower self is reactive. The second, your higher self knows and understands your circumstances from a universal perspective and integrates all of your needs, wants, and desires, as well as the activity of the physical world around you. Third, your lower self is operating from a limited perspective and is not fully integrated, so it cannot weigh conflicting desires the way the higher self does. Given the choice, most decisions would benefit from full awareness of the reality. What about intuition? Information received intuitively can be coming from any of the above places. It may or may not include all pertinent data. Your intuitive information could also be coming from external entities or energies that are not authentically you. Other people's thoughts can enter your head, especially if they are thinking about you and you are thinking about them. Many couples experience this communication phenomenon as normal. Information coming from your lower self may feel like it is coming from intuition, but it could come from your desires, from external entities, or from the child in you who wants something you've long forgotten. Your information might come from your angels or guides. Angels and guides. What is wrong with getting information from angels or guides? Nothing is wrong with that, except it is not authentically you, and your purpose and goal here is to learn and gain access to your divine self. Your angels and guides stand ready to help us at any time, and are probably with you now. The purpose of the angelic presence on earth is to help build a personal relationship between Creator and the human race. They want you to gain this connection and will fully support your getting it. In fact, my angels have given me a metaphor to explain this. Suppose you are driving a fun sports car on a mountain road. Initially, you might be going pretty fast as you enjoy the open air, the sunshine, and the beautiful countryside. Then your lower self kicks in, that part of you that keeps you safe most of the time, and decides maybe you should slow down and take it easy. After all, it is a pretty curvy road, or maybe it is one of your guides or angels telling you to slow down. Another car approaches from the opposite direction, and you manage to stay out of its way, even though the driver has crossed over the center line into your lane right in front of you. You end up swerving to the side of the road, but still safe. You manage to pull yourself together and think, wow, that was a close call. Good thing I slowed down and my reactions were so quick. Lower self is reactive. Your higher self is proactive. Your higher self would experience this whole scenario and take a proactive approach. Your higher self will be aware of the oncoming car long before you are and send you a message such as, why don't you take a break? You've been driving for a while and need to rest. There's a scenic overlook coming up ahead. Pull over and enjoy the view. When the car from the other direction comes down that road toward you, you are out of harm's way. You might not even know that a reckless driver is coming down the hill. You never noticed because your higher self directed you to get off the road. You are able to see how your higher self influenced your actions proactively and allowed the circumstances to occur around you while keeping you from being directly involved. Your higher self is proactive, your lower self is reactive. There is no. Many years ago, when I first started working with this information, I realized there was only yes. Although you can teach your higher self no, technically there is no. This is why I refer to choice as God or not God. So if you get a good, clear signal for yes and nothing for no or neutral, you have enough information to operate in reality. Go with that. Advance awareness. One of my longtime students shared what happened to her. Ginny was very proud of having earned her black belt in karate, a feat she accomplished after she turned 50. Those who have arrived at this karate milestone know that once you've earned your black belt is when the serious work begins. Every Monday morning, she dutifully drove 1 hour on an interstate to get to her dojo in the next city. One particular Monday morning, she decided she wanted to meet with her teacher. She calculated that if she started out 1.5 hours early, it would give her plenty of time to meet with him. She left her home at 7:30 a.m. for her 9 a.m. class. Along the way, she received a message from her higher self. On this highway, there are 3 exits going into the destination city. Her higher self instructed her to take the first exit. The first exit is convenient and entails the fewest miles, but it takes much more time due to local traffic and rush hour. The second exit, although longer by miles, is the most direct, routing around city traffic. It generally takes the least amount of time. The third exit is way out of her way. While driving, she was told 3 times to get off at the first exit. She rationalized each time that it would consume some of her precious extra time for her desired meeting with her instructor. She drove right past the first highway exit. The second highway exit was closed, but there were men working on it. Taking the only remaining exit, she now was required to drive quite a distance out of her way. The instructor did speak to her the moment she arrived. He commanded 50 push-ups since she arrived late to class. Ginny was able to recognize in hindsight that her higher self had been trying to provide her with what she really wanted. She dismissed it because she was accustomed to feeling that her best information would come from using her logic. 3 times while driving, she was told to get off at the first exit. She rationalized each time that it would take too long and chose to follow her ego. Have you ever done that? Yes. Hindsight leads us to a different conclusion, and we understand that 15 minutes early is better than 15 minutes late. There's a logical reason for using your higher self information, and we will get to that shortly. I've been teaching this aspect of the higher self connection since I began offering the MerKaBa workshop in 1995. On September 11th, 2001, I had my own hindsight about how significant this higher self connection really is. Higher self and 9/11. I had been guided to hold my series of workshops in New York City in September 2001. In New York, I did not have a host and selected dates based on my higher self direction. I had been going to the city regularly and had received prompting from my higher self to be in New York in September and the exact dates to be there. Once the workshop dates had been set, I decided I would add an extra day to shop and visit friends while I was there. Back then, I did not ask my higher self about a vacation day. This particular trip had me flying home on September 11th. However, when I attempted to purchase my airline ticket, I felt my higher self directing me to come home immediately after the workshop on September 10th. People have asked me, what was it like? For me, I had this sinking feeling. Have you ever played the game of Monopoly? Think about how you feel when you pull the card that says go to jail, go directly to jail. Do not pass, go. Do not collect $200. It was that kind of feeling and very strong. I asked, what am I to do then? I was told, go directly home, no playtime this trip. At the time, a friend asked me, why aren't you staying as you planned? And I told him, I really do not know. I just know I need to be home. Maybe one of my sons will need me for something. When one becomes accustomed to the voice of the higher self, it is easy to listen and to follow the direction given. The higher self does not always show up for me as a voice. Sometimes it is a feeling. In this instance, I had no idea how significant that would be. I would not have been on the down flights of September 11 if I had stayed in New York that extra day, but I would not have gotten home. There were no flights anywhere in the country for a whole week while the government sorted out the next course of action to follow this terrible act. I was very grateful not to be caught in the chaos of being grounded at an airport far from home while my teenage son was at home for a week without mom. A student in that class had a job interview that Tuesday morning where she was scheduled to walk through the World Trade Center just about the time of chaos. That morning, she was so uncomfortable with the prospect that she called her interviewer, asking if she could interview by phone. She understood in hindsight that her feeling of discomfort may have saved her life. Invocations. In my invocation at the altar at each workshop, I ask for a direct connection with my higher self and the higher self of each person in my class. I specifically ask that their higher self be able to communicate directly with me so that I might serve each person perfectly. I then ask for the same connection with each of us that we might all serve each other perfectly. A similar invocation is also part of my daily practice. You are encouraged to do the same. My favorite is an exceptionally helpful tool to receive higher self assistance with interpersonal interactions when trying to communicate with someone who may not be hearing what you have to say in third-dimensional reality. I ask for my higher self to work with the higher self of the other person for the purpose of fill in the blank, and that this communication be for the highest good of all, creating a win-win circumstance for everyone. We all have interacted with bosses, spouses, relatives, or customers who, for whatever reason, are unable to hear what we have to say. I have often advised people who may be facing a difficult meeting or negotiation to ask for the higher self connection between all persons so that everyone's needs can be heard, met, and addressed. Following is a true story of a woman who made such an invocation and how it may have saved her client's life. Higher self to higher self in the emergency room. One of my students, an alternative healer named Juanita, was giving ongoing monthly treatments to a client named Susan, a medical doctor. Prior to their work together, Dr. Susan had landed in the emergency room with a panic attack. The drugs used to treat her turned out to be totally wrong for her, causing her to leave her body and have a near-death experience. 4 years later, Dr. Susan had another emergency room visit with what turned out to be another panic attack. Although she is a medical doctor, some major emotional things had just occurred in her life to trigger this panic. Although the attack was not at all related to the healing work they had been doing together, Juanita knew Susan needed to go to the emergency room and insisted she go. Because of their ongoing relationship, Susan asked Juanita to work on her remotely while she was in the emergency room. Because Juanita had trained with me and understood the use of the higher self connection, she called in the higher self of the attending physician and asked for both Susan and the physician to be connected to their higher selves and to each other's higher selves. The instruction was that whoever was the emergency room doctor would get his instruction on the appropriate medicine from Susan's higher self. Later, Juanita spoke to Susan about this. The healer's prayer occurred at the same time that the attending physician announced with considerable passion that he was going to go with his gut and use a specific medication. He selected a less commonly prescribed medication, which turned out to be the exact one able to heal the anxiety attack and help Susan through her crisis without a drug reaction. Juanita explained to Susan that her higher self had directed her to create a link between the two doctors, the emergency room doctor and the patient doctor, at the higher self level. The emergency room doctor accepted his strong feelings and let them guide him to an alternate medication. He was in reality getting accurate information from the higher self of the patient, Susan, making sure the correct medication would be used this time. Higher self and family matters. In another example, a young mom wanted to attend a seminar. She and her former husband were alternating weekends with their sons, and the weekend of the workshop was clear for her. But then one of her sons was selected as one of 100 finalists for a full scholarship. All the candidates and their families were invited for a weekend at the college, where the students would go through a series of interviews and tests. This was, of course, the same weekend as the seminar. The mom knew it would not be fair to haul all their children for the 8-hour drive to the college. Caught in a dilemma of what to do, she consulted her higher self. The first thing her higher self told her was, "This is not your decision. This is your son's decision. Tell him there are 3 choices and all decisions are equal. He can drive to the college with either parent or fly by himself." When given the choice, her son didn't hesitate. "In that case, I will go by myself and fly." This mom would never have considered the third alternative, but because it came from her higher self, she was confident it was a good decision for all involved. This enabled her to take care of her son and also attend her seminar. What is a signal from the higher self? How do I know I'm getting a real signal? A signal or symbol from the higher self can take any form. For those of you who are kinesthetic, you may experience a feeling. Others have a sense or knowing. If you already have this sense or feeling, you will understand it more confidently with practice. Others get colors, shapes, or other visual experiences. Some will hear something. Still, others will notice a scent. I have included examples in the table on pages 90 to 91 from a few of my students to show you what some other people have experienced. What if I don't get yes and no symbols or signals? If you have been doing MerKaBa meditation for a while, ask your higher self for symbols or signals, and you come up with nothing, it is time for you to select symbols you can understand and teach them to your higher self. You will need to pick something to communicate this knowledge of what you want for the signals or symbols signifying yes, no, and neutral. How do I teach the higher self my signals? What if I do not get a clear signal in meditation? What do I do? When my oldest son was a 2-year-old, he taught us the word for cheese. It was ga. He could not say cheese, so every time he saw cheese, a favorite of his at the time, he named it for us. We learned that if he wanted cheese, he would say ga. If your higher self doesn't give you clear signals, then you will assign values that you can recognize in this same way. To set the matrix for these signals, select something you can easily replicate in your mind's eye. Make it something simple that you will accept. For example, if you see colors easily, green could stand for yes, red for no, or thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. If you find it easier to experience energy in your body or feeling, you might decide that a simple energy whoosh on the right side could stand for yes, on the left for no, and in the middle for neutral. Many people experience geometric shapes as one of their signals. Whatever it is, choose something that will work for you, but pick something and let it stand. Do not question it. If you decide that a red car should be your signal for yes, and you close your eyes and cannot imagine a red car, that is not a good signal for you. You must select something you can replicate in your mind's eye, and then your higher self can communicate it to you to experience it. Then practice with something you already know the answer to so that you can get the feel of it. An example is, do I have a son? You already know the answer. Let the correct symbol or signal present itself. Continue practicing with mundane questions such as, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to wear this shirt today? If the answer is no, move to the next shirt and repeat the question. Keep asking the same way. Looking at a menu, ask, Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to get the soup? If the response is neutral, ask, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to get the salad? If the response is neutral, ask, both? The response may be yes. Remember to phrase them as yes or no questions, always addressing the higher self by name. Notice the tendency to ask, should I, has been replaced with higher self, is it in my highest and best good? What about neutral? There are 5 possible reasons for a neutral response. They will be discussed in the next chapter. Please note that neutral is not maybe. Many people get this confused. Neutral means neither yes nor no. You might want to ask more questions after the neutral response to get clarity. Once you understand the 5 possible reasons for the neutral response, it will make more sense. Examples of symbols or signals. Brian's yes symbol is a smiley face. When he went walking on the beach right after the meditation where that information came in, he found a shell with a smiley face worn into it by Mother Nature. The synchronicity of finding that shell was the higher self providing clarity and reinforcing his signal. Kelly first experienced her higher self through the Michelangelo painting of the hand of God reaching for the hand of man as her symbol of the higher self. Her yes signal was a thumb pointing up and thumbs down for no. Dennis's higher self has a sense of humor. His signals are a Mickey Mouse white gloved hand with the thumb up or down. A man in the class was the drag-along partner of a woman who was very into this work. He decided to attend on a whim. He had never really done any meditation before, and he asked me, in a whispered voice, "Can your higher self have a sense of humor?" When the higher self connection was made, his higher self showed him a red beating heart for yes and green M&Ms for no. That same man was given a vision of his higher self the following day. He whispered in my ear, "Can my higher self be a woman?" Coincidentally, that same man shares the same first name with another male student from a few years back. Both men's higher selves appear as a woman. In one class, there was a lot of crystal energy expressed in the location, and the store hosting me had hundreds of crystals. Many participants in this class experienced their signals in the form of crystals. In another class, a man, Tom, was a former military guy. His signals reflected him as a paratrooper getting ready to jump from a plane. His neutral sign was at the open door of the plane, and he never jumps. His no signal is the jump, and his parachute does not open. Yes is him jumping, and the chute opens. Another man in that same class sees his higher self represented by lightning. Jagged means yes and has a direct feeling. Spiral lightning is no with a dancing type of feeling, and neutral shows up as a flat line of lightning. The signal for neutral frequently tends to come up as a flat line or some variation thereof, such as a horizon, the sea, or a minus sign. The table on pages 90 to 91 contains some of the information from students coming through the meditation where I introduce the higher self and ask for the higher self signals. Help, I'm not getting anything. If you do not get a symbol or signal, don't despair. You are not alone, and I will be providing tools to help you communicate with your higher self. If you do not get a signal, it just means you are not visual or auditory. It may mean that you are so mental or cerebral that you have not allowed those signals to appear for you. Allow yourself to see or feel any kind of response, and with practice, you will find the higher self connection. In the next chapter, you will receive instructions and techniques to help you develop and strengthen your higher self connection. Practice is critical. When do I ask my higher self these questions? Initially, you will ask your higher self questions while you are in meditation. If you are doing the MerKaBa, it is between breaths 14 and 15. Many of us take a little pause there, and it is a perfect time to connect with your higher self. This is because you are anchored into your heart starting from breath 14. I always invite my higher self to join me in my heart. You will also find this instruction in my version of the MerKaBa meditation in the CD audio MerKaBa 2. Remember that the ideal meeting ground for you and your higher self is in your heart, because it is the one place you both have in common. It is much preferable to check in with your higher self while you're in meditation. Just as on the cell phone, it is far easier to receive clear communication if you are in a place with good reception. If your cell phone keeps cutting out on you, you are likely to limit your conversation until you have clear reception. Remember that the best reception between you and your higher self is while you are in your heart. You may even wish to go back to Chapter 2 to review some of the heart-opening exercises. How do I actually do this? Upon completing Breath 14, while you are still in meditation doing the MerKaBa, you simply think or ask the following. Higher Self, I am choosing to be in my heart. Please join me in my heart. Higher Self, I am making a commitment to build a new level of communication between me and my higher self. Because of this, I am asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for yes. I'm asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for no. I'm asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for neutral. Wait for the signal or symbol to appear. 4. I thank you, higher self, for working with me. Even if you think you already have a good connection with your higher self, you can always improve it. No matter what level you are at with your communication, there is always room for improvement. If you disagree, then you do not need this book. A woman observed in a class that everyone around her was getting guidance from higher self, yet she was not. Someone said, "Have you asked? Asking your higher self to work with you more closely will bring the higher self in more closely. You're also making a clear commitment to start to interact with your higher self. It is an important act of will. Make sure you ask." Fuzzy information. Occasionally, as your higher self connection becomes richer, you will discover something will feel not quite right. Perhaps the information will be muddy or seem strange compared to your usual feelings when checking in with your higher self. Pursuing this suspicion will help you recognize to reframe your question or ask what is going on. Lack of clarity is significant and requires further investigation. Ask, is this my higher self? Only your higher self may respond with a yes. Getting to know your higher self communication leads to all kinds of information you did not expect. Find a way to unhook from your need to know or any other need. Be open and consciously work on non-judgmental review and reaction to your higher self information. Choose to step away from the habit of interpreting everything from a polarity vantage point. Instead of saying, I'm not getting anything, especially if you usually do, consider the vagueness that has its own message. What is going on? You will learn more about the higher dimensions in Chapter 12. Ultimately, I concluded that there is only one question to ask your higher self. That question is non-pejorative, non-judgmental, and very open-ended. It is, higher self, what is going on? Now, the opening of your heart is the key to understanding the information you are getting. Think of your heart opening as if it were a translator. The more open and receptive to giving and receiving unconditional love, the more you will be able to comprehend the incoming data. The more experienced your heart is in practicing unconditional love, the more incoming information will be meaningful to you. There is a direct relationship between your heart and your understanding. If it is knowledge you seek, then open your heart to get the answer. To learn the maximum amount of understandable information, we simply ask the question with no bias. The question that reflects no bias is, higher self, what is going on? I suggest you use this formula every time something happens that defies the rules of reality. It is about free will. Until you have an open heart and establish a connection, your higher self does not care about you or interact with you. In fact, it is against cosmic law for your higher self to intervene. Higher self is not permitted to interact with you unless by prior to incarnation agreement or other special circumstance until you decide you want to communicate with it. If your higher self initiated an interaction with you before you asked for it, then your higher self would be violating your free will. That, for your higher self, is not possible. Higher self communication into third dimension reality must be initiated by you. What about the people who spontaneously start getting information? This is generally by contract, and you may have pre-existing agreements with your higher self for something significant to open you to the higher self communication. Even those of you reading this may be able to pinpoint an event that started you in this direction. Communication in both directions. If you are studying with a piano teacher, she might decide you are ready for a difficult piece and purchase the music on your behalf to help you with it. If your teacher saw some music that she thought you would like, she might suggest that you explore it and offer guidance on playing it. When your communication with your higher self is reliable and consistent, the communication will begin to travel in both directions. Your higher self will begin to give you information that you may need and desire that perhaps you did not specifically ask for in the moment. The free flow of information occurs as you grow your connection to your higher self with your practice and devotion. In the next chapter, we will develop this newfound knowledge. If you are serious about developing a connection with your higher self that is virtually foolproof, you will choose to practice. You will choose to practice with questions that have no consequence to you. We will explore that and your commitment next.